100 hours is not a lot of time. When you add it up, it's a little more than 4 days. 4 days in a lifetime of around 15,700 days is just a drop in the bucket. But 100 hours seems like a lot when you think of it in terms of riding a dirt bike. 100 hours on the KTM 500 EXC has gone by fast. Only 9 months ago I bought the bike from Go AZ in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was a rocky start, but I kept riding and I have no regrets. This is my review of the KTM 500 EXC I affectionately call Super Freak. When I decided I wanted to upgrade bikes from the 2014 Honda CRF 250L, my number one priority was to buy a street legal bike that was much more capable on tough trails as well as a motocross track. I was sure that I was too overweight for a 350, and it wasn't long before I was at a dealership asking the sales guy if he thought the KTM 500 EXC or the 350 EXC would be better for me. A week later, I rolled out of the dealership on a brand new 2016 500 EXC.
Oh, that hurt.
I didn't have much experience as a rider, and as some people have pointed out, the 500 is a big bike to learn on. At 25 hours, I gave a review on the bike that, looking back, wasn't very informative. I hope to do a better job in this video. 75 hours and 7 months later, my experience level, confidence, and knowledge base is significantly better. The information I have to offer now is probably much more helpful than it was then. Because how you intend to use the bike is one of the most important things to consider, let's start with the purpose and use of the bike, and then I'll get into some details about the maintenance and various other aspects. When deciding whether or not to buy this bike, consider how you plan to use it. I've ridden the bike regularly under the following 3 conditions: on the road, on the motocross track, and on the trail. Let's start with the road. As a dual sport, the EXC is meant for on and off-road use. On the road, it's fun to ride. It can top 100 miles an hour, and at 60, it still has plenty of power left when you want to accelerate to change lanes, or if you just want to overtake slower traffic. But there's drawbacks to riding on the road. The EXC is not designed with rider comfort in mind. The seat is hard and narrow, making long rides on the pavement a literal pain in the ass. Also, the road will chew through your stock tires within a very short time. There's many owners who put road tires and other modifications on these bikes, but I have no experience on the 500 in these supermoto configurations. In my opinion, motarding this bike is like removing an endangered animal from the wild and putting it in the circus. A shame really, but I shouldn't judge. I can see how it could be great fun in this configuration, it's just not for me. I may be a square, but on the road, I just feel like a motorcycle is not a toy. I'm a much better all-around rider than I was when I bought the bike, but my weakness is still the motocross track. With that in mind, I should probably leave it to others with more track skills to comment on the suitability of the 500 EXC on the track. I will add that the bike is actually light for its size, and the 2017 model is supposed to be about 40 pounds lighter. You can throw it around and have a lot of fun on the track, but without spending a lot of cash, it's never going to be the same as a purpose-built motocross bike. The EXC features a PDS suspension instead of the link suspension that you find on most motocross bikes. The suspension is very good on the trail and it can be used for motocross, but you need to make some big adjustments if you intend on spending a lot of time on the track. My first issue with the bike on the track came from bottoming out the suspension so much. The stock suspension is designed for a maximum rider weight of 187 pounds with full gear on. This means that heavier people have 2 options: have the suspension tuned and modified for your weight, or lose the weight. I weighed over 220 pounds without gear when I bought the bike, so I chose to lose weight over an expensive suspension rebuild. I mean, obviously that's cheaper and it's healthier. Today I'm down to 170 pounds, and that puts me around 185 with all my gear on. I still bottom out now and then, especially the forks, but not nearly as often, and that's only when I hit really hard. And part of this is due to my weight loss, but I'm sure a lot of it has to do that I'm riding better. I have better technique. I followed the owner's manual and set my rider sag, and I adjusted the suspension to the sport mode, and since I've added even a couple more clicks to the high-speed compression, which has helped a lot, but I still don't know how to properly tune the suspension. There may be a better setting out there, I just haven't found it yet. The stock bike's geared with a 15-tooth sprocket in the front and a 45-tooth sprocket in the rear. This makes the bike more suited to higher road speeds, but makes it less responsive in the lower gears that you need on the track. It also helps KTM pass the California noise restrictions. By switching the sprockets to a 13-tooth front and 50-tooth rear, I noticed the bike instantly felt more responsive on the track. The acceleration in the low gears is like a rocket, and the increased engine braking helps in the turns. Trail riding is a pretty broad category. There are significant differences between a country dirt road, pole line access roads, jeep trails, single track, sandy washes, and rocky, rutted out death gauntlet type trails that go up hills that a mountain goat would think twice about going up. Yet all of these fall into the trail riding category. Fortunately, the 500 EXC is suitable for all of it. It's a monster in all of these situations. While I've hit my own physical and mental limits many times, I have not yet found the limit to what this bike can handle. In fact, I would say it's overkill to buy a 500 EXC if you have no intention of riding anything worse than an unimproved dirt road. This thing rips in the gnarliest of terrain and should be unleashed from the safe humdrum of easy trail riding. If you ride the 500 EXC and you never experience the capabilities of this bike in a hard enduro environment, well, you really haven't ridden it yet. That brings me to durability. Anyone who has watched most of my videos knows I have put this bike through the ringer. It has been dropped more times than any bike should be, and to its credit, the 500 EXC's come through it almost unscathed. Amazingly, the shift lever and brake pedal are two things that haven't broke, that I am completely surprised about. On the Honda, every time that bike went down, either the shift lever bent way out of position or snapped off completely, or the brake pedal did. Woo! On this bike, in 9 months and 100 hours and I don't know how many drops, neither one of those things has had to be replaced. In fact, the only stock components that I've had to replace due to crashes are the skid plate, rear fender, and turn signals. The Metzler tires that came stock didn't last long, not in the desert. They were too soft. In fact, I'm on my fourth set of tires in less than a year. The latest set shouldn't be counted because I just put on the tubeless system, which requires you to mount them with new tires. The tires that I changed them for actually still had a lot of tread left. I said it before, if you ride this bike on the road, you're going to chew up tires quickly. I've actually decided to limit my road time greatly for this reason. I no longer ride on the road unless I have to. This has allowed me to move from the DOT approved tires to more aggressive tires. Right now I'm running the Maxxis Desert IT tire. It has shown the most promise. The last set I had on, I had been running for about 60 hours and they still had tons of tread left before I upgraded to the tubeless system and had to buy new tires. Alright, so let's get to the subject that everybody who's not a KTM fan likes to point out, the maintenance. Ask anyone and they will be happy to tell you that a KTM is high maintenance. But there are others who say the manufacturer's service intervals are overkill. I don't know if it is or isn't, and I'm not trying to find out, so I follow the manufacturer's maintenance schedule as close as I can. The list is quite intimidating, but if you learn to do it yourself, you'll save a lot of money. I came into this bike with no mechanic experience whatsoever, but now I feel like I'm pretty competent. I've removed and modded the emissions components, I put on a modded fuel rail, clutch weight, exhaust manifold, exhaust tip, I've changed oil, handlebars, checked valve clearances, changed tires, and more. And if I can do it, so can you. You should know your bike well and be prepared to diagnose and fix it on the trail anyway. Start with small stuff and work your way up. Eventually you'll feel pretty confident too. At any rate, the consensus among most owners I know is that as long as you stick to a reasonable oil change schedule and do regular inspections, the bike seems to be fine. I feel that it is important to warn you all that the torque specs outlined in the manual should be diligently followed if you're doing your own maintenance. The bike has a lot of aluminum that can easily be stripped if you over-torque. My friend had to re-tap his threads for the oil filter cover because he slightly over-torqued his. So use care in a torque wrench that uses foot-pounds. And ensure the torque wrench you purchase or use covers the full range of torque settings that are listed in the owner's manual. Let's talk a little bit about the engine. Unfortunately, the EXC model in the United States is set up to conform to California's emission standards. KTM ships them from the factory with a slew of components that make the bike stay within these ridiculous regulations. No matter what the laws are in your state, the bike's been set up to conform to California's restrictive rules. With components and settings that are designed to reduce emissions and make the bike quieter, the setup actually robs the bike of some of its power, and it creates some unwanted side effects, like deceleration popping, an improper fuel-to-air mixture, and flameouts. You can unlock some of the bike's power by disabling or removing these emission components. It's an easy project that I was able to complete with no maintenance experience, using tools that were supplied with the bike. You can further unlock the bike's hidden horsepower with some inexpensive mods and proper adjustments to the throttle position sensor. When you get this bike home, right off the bat, you might notice a low or weak idle, hesitation, sputtering, etc. Much of this is due to the emission setup I mentioned earlier. Take that crap off. You can set the idle adjustment knob to turn the idle up, but nothing improves performance like the mod fuel rail and TPS tuner from Dave at Best Dual Sport Bikes.
Something in the mail from Best Dual Sport Bikes. And let's take a look. It looks like we have the grunt for the exhaust manifold, and we have the exhaust tip, the clutch weight. This is part of the big bottom kit, the insert, the big oily, the clutch cover, and the TPS tuner. Very awesome.
I'm going to take the fuel rail, I'm going to put the injector into it. Make that your first performance mod and you'll not regret it. Removing the emission stuff was the first thing I did and eliminated most of those issues. I've done oil changes regularly. I took it in for its first valve clearance checks at 50 hours and did the second one recently myself. Both times they were in spec. The engine has been reliable and I've noticed no decrease in performance over the past 100 hours. If anything, with the mods I put on, it only gets better. The bike is liquid cooled and has a split radiator with a cooling fan that automatically activates at certain temperatures. Now, I've read that the bike overheats easily when riding slow technical single track, but this hasn't been my experience. And you would think riding in the desert of Arizona that if it did have a cooling problem, I would have discovered it by now. The right side radiator was recently bent in a high-speed crash, but it's not leaked or overheated as a result. To replace it, an aftermarket radiator is going to cost me about $200. The clutch. The hydraulic line for the clutch was damaged early on and sprung a leak near the clutch fluid reservoir. I fixed it by tightening the nut at the coupling where it was leaking. That was in November of 2015, and I've had no issues with it since. I added a clutch weight, which has significantly reduced the stalls. The clutch weight I also got from Dave at Best Dual Sport Bikes, and it came with a larger clutch cover. The larger cover is actually meant to accommodate the size of the clutch weight, but it also increases the oil capacity of the bike. You might want to buy an extra O-ring or clutch cover gasket if you plan on doing this mod, and they cost about $3 on Rocky Mountain ATV. So let's talk about the body. With the exception of the rear fender and the skid plate, the bike looks great. It's held up pretty well. The rear fender license plate monstrosity needs to go away as soon as possible. Get rid of it, put on an aftermarket one, or follow Dave at Best Dual Sport Bikes advice and cut it with a Sawzall, because it can easily come in contact with the rear tire and get damaged, and it probably will. The stock skid plate seems to be for looks only. Anytime I would bottom out or hit a jump hard, it would come loose. When I bought the bike, I had the aftermarket TMD plastic skid plate installed. It looked more durable, it covered more of the engine parts, it looked like it was going to be a better skid plate, but the mounts were weak and it would rip off anytime I would bottom out. Finally and recently I installed the Ricochet aluminum skid plate, and I'm happy to report that this is a solid must-have for this bike. Now, for some reason the airbox cover is kind of a hassle to keep securely closed. They could have made a better design, but that's really my only complaint about the body. Alright, fuel. When it comes to the tank, I don't know what they were thinking. It's so ugly. It holds about 2.3 US gallons, which is enough to go around 100 miles before a refill, but I have never let it run down that far, so I really don't know. And with the new fuel rail, I'm not sure exactly how much fuel I'm burning. But overall, hindsight's 2020. If I knew what I know now, I might have done a few different things. First, I would have to reconsider buying the EXC over the XCFW. If I absolutely had to ride the bike on the road, I would have saved about $1,000 by just adding an aftermarket lighting kit to the XCFW, and I wouldn't have had to deal with all that California emission stuff. If I knew I was going to drop 60 pounds and start racing, I would have also considered a 350 for its easier handling and tight single track. I might have even had a much tougher decision to make, as I would have probably considered a 450 SX. It all comes down to how you want to use the bike. When evaluating which bike you should buy, it's good to be as objective as possible. If you think you're going to be spending a lot of time on the road as well as the trail, then a good dual sport is an excellent choice, the EXC. But if your off-road riding tends to be just casual trails and dirt, consider a cheaper bike. The EXC might just be overkill. If you think you'd like to dabble in motocross style rides, the EXC is capable, but not well suited to it. I would say the EXC is a great all-around bike for most things, but the 500 is best for flat-out open desert speed. For most riders, the 350 is probably plenty of bike. Now, if you want a good KTM for both track and trail and don't intend to ride on the street at all, try the SX models. If the track is not your thing and your only concern is the trail, the XCFWs are perfect. Bottom line, if you're not sure what you want to do with the bike and you just want to see if riding is for you, maybe you should just buy a cheap used bike to start out with, maybe borrow one. That being said, I have no regrets. Riding this bike is an awesome experience. It's become kind of a lifestyle and a challenge, a fitness program, and one of the best therapies for a happy and healthy life. I love my 500 EXC. Well, that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching.